upon a time, there was a man in the Bronx, and he was with his buddies on a stoop, having some beers and some cigarettes. And he walked down the street and went to the bodega and got a Lucy cigarette. Now, hopefully all of you know what a Lucy cigarette is. It's one single cigarette. And he pays $1 for that. And he walks back, spends some more time with his friends, and about a half an hour later, he gets up and he walks back to that same bodega. Pays another $1 for that cigarette. Walks back to his friends, sits around, and having a wonderful conversation. Now, there's an insight that this man, why is he paying for $1 for a cigarette when a pack costs $10 and he gets 24? Why is that man? And what was the insight that he figured out why not to pay $10 for 24 and pay $1 for one? Anyone can think of the insight of why that gentleman is paying 3 times more for a pack? That's usually most people's answers, but not correct. Anyone else? No. Good. That's a good one. I haven't heard that before, but no. So the reason why is in that situation, he has learned from his past experience and has learned from an insight. And to me, insights are what innovation is about, is connecting insights to then find and where you are. And all of you that made your presentations, you saw insights. And those insights then turned into an opportunity that you want to bring forward. So his insight was, if I buy a pack and spend $10 on it, I then go back to that stoop and I only smoke one of those cigarettes, maybe 2, and all the rest of them I give to my friends. Because in that neighborhood, you always share what you have in front of you, because everyone is then bumming a cigarette from you. So he found, and his insight over the time, was it was cheaper for him to pay $1 for that cigarette than it was for him to pay $10 for that one cigarette. And it's those little insights in life that will start to come about, and connecting the dots, to me, is what makes a great innovator. And insights are what changes things. So I'm just going to quickly go through, and I've been very lucky of being inside of this business for 32 years in a wonderful situation with a wonderful owner that we're public, but he owns 100% of the voting shares, him and his wife. We started, and I was the 17th person hired, and 32 years later, these are some of the things, almost all of them, pretty much everything on there was my idea, except for the original one, which was Jim's. So let me just quickly go through some insights, and then I'm going to get back to my second part, because I wanted to change this up a little bit because I thought it was kind of interesting to hear the speakers, and I think insights are probably one of the most important things you can take away from this as being an innovator. So Jim's insight for Sam Adams. Jim's family is the longest brewing family in America. Jim Koch's family has been brewing beer in America longer than any other family in America. Now, everyone else before him, they lost their jobs because their breweries went out of business. Jim's was successful. And the other interesting part, when Jim eventually someday sells, he will sell for 4 to 5 times more than any of the Anheuser-Busch family ever got for selling Anheuser-Busch inside of it. It's this small little guy here in Boston. So he saw an insight, which was when we asked for Europe's tired and poor, we didn't mean their beer. And that meant, why are we drinking this old, skunky beer that's full of preservatives when we can make great tasting beer here in America? And he did that with his great-great-grandfather's recipe called Lewis Cook Lager, which was Sam Adams. And inside of that did many things that were little insights that he learned to make it something a little bit better than everybody else's. We were the first brewery to open code date beer. No one else had ever put open code dating on beer to tell you when it goes out of code. Beer lasts 6 months. After that, it starts to denigrate in its flavor and taste. You don't get sick. You get sick if you drink a lot of them, but you don't get sick before it's been there. 2, We have higher six-pack carriers than anyone else because we don't let the light come into the beer and destroy the beer. Green bottles were a big thing back then with Heineken. That was what you had to bring to certain fraternity parties. When I was a kid, you had to bring a green bottle, and you weren't allowed to bring Molson. So you would bring the higher-end stuff, but actually the light goes in, and if you ever drink a Heineken, it skunks. The funniest part is yesterday there was an article that Heineken was buying Boston Beer Company, which is not true, but it is now this skunky beer is going to try to buy us. And we have many other things. The last part of what Jim has done is the order of the hops. No other American, or actually no other person outside of Germany has been given the order of the hops, which was he brought back 2 strains of hops back into fruition that were going out because the yields aren't that high, it costs much, which are called Hallertau and Tettnang hops. And he brought that back, and the German government gave him the order of the hops, which is one of the highest things you can possibly get. So let me just go through a couple of these other ones, and I'll be a little bit less detailed. Twisted tea. So it was a big thing going on many years ago. This is about 17 years ago. Mike's Lemonade came in, and it was flying across the United States. We saw that was happening, and we wanted to do something a little bit more higher end and a bit more quality, and that's why we decided to do teas. Well, we thought it was going to be a feminine, easy drinking product, is where we thought we had it set up to be 70% female, 30% men. Well, good things start on a piece of paper, but then reality hits. And then you have to follow reality. And I think part of being an innovator is making sure that you're not stuck with what your first decision was, but you're going to change your decisions as time comes on of what the marketplace gives you. And what we found all of a sudden was this stuff was selling in Maine and Montana. So what do? Which is one of the things I think I'm best at, is go to Maine and Montana. Not just look at screens, not look thing, but actually go to Maine and Montana to find out why is it selling so well in those 2 areas. And there was 3 constants. Maine, you had paper mills that guys were making somewhere between $35 to $50 an hour. You had C-stores, meaning small little C-stores that these people would go to. And 3, it was blue-collar, middle class, and inside of that, they love iced tea. And we went to Montana. It was copper mines. It's one of the largest amounts of copper mines in the world. Again, guys making $35 to $50 an hour. C-stores, and they are also blue-collar and white. It's mainly white. We go there, and now it changes the entire business. We now see who this is, and we see those demographics of who it is. Now, the beauty of Twisted Tea, and I'll give you an example around here. Downtown Boston, you won't sell very much Twisted Tea. You go to Quincy, you cannot, it is everywhere in Quincy. And it is the demographic of understanding that insight of who that drinker was, and then piling into who that was. So I then did geographic breakdown of zip codes of those areas of where we were doing very well, then worked to get those zip codes then for every other state in the United States, and then gave it to our wholesalers and told them, this is where it will sell, and this is where it won't sell, and please sell it here. And then now it is the #1 selling F&B in the United States. It'll be $1 billion this year in sales, and it's a 96 share of the tea category in the United States. It's been up double digits every year it was, came into effect. Second one was Angry Orchard. I saw that there was an opportunity inside of the cider category. You had these old, boring, kind of European Strongbow and Magners, and then you had Woodchuck. Now, first of all, it's like Woodchuck. Now, if you've ever seen the label, there is a rodent on the label of Woodchuck. What the hell does a rodent and cider have anything to do with each other? So that was one very easy thing to take care of. And then 2, this kind of boring stayed, and they weren't using high quality apples in most of these, except for Strongbow actually does use quite good apples. So we decided to change that and come up with Angry Orchard. And we use nothing but the best Italian apples, which are culinary, and the best bittersweets, which come from France. We're the largest purchaser of bittersweet apples from France than any other company in the world. We're a 46 share of the category in the United States, and it's about 1.5 share of the beer business. The next one is Truly. Now, this one was probably the best of all. when I go across the United States, and I do a lot of going into stores, and I ask the same question over and over again. What's doing extremely well to a retailer, and what's not really doing that well that you thought was doing well? Well, during that summer that I came up with this idea, there was something called hard root beer going on. Not your father's hard root beer, and some of you might remember this, but it was on fire for about a year and a half. But then everyone figured out it has 265 calories, and it's going to rot your teeth out. So that lasted for a little while, but everywhere I went in the country, everyone was talking about not your father's root beer. But then I came to New England, and they were talking about spiked seltzer. And there was this thing going on, and one guy from Nantucket Nectar who started it saw that there was an opportunity. So we saw this and said, okay, why is that happening? So I started doing some research. And come to find out that consumers didn't want goodness in alcoholic beverages. They want the bad taken out. And that was the insight that we came from this. It wasn't that they wanted good in, because I kind of have this analogy. People, and I've tried to do that with an alcoholic kombucha I did, put good things into an alcoholic beverage. People reject. It's kind of like a cupcake. It's like, if you want to have a cupcake, it's my time to have a cupcake. I've decided to have this cupcake. I've worked really hard for this cupcake. Let me have my goddamn cupcake, right? And if somebody shoves vitamin C in my cupcake, I'm not going to like that because it's my time. And the same thing for alcohol. It is my time to relax. This is going to help me to relax. And I don't need you to shove good things into my alcohol. And almost every single time that has happened, that is the case. Now, an interesting other insight to that is I also helped start a cannabis beverage company for us in Canada. The brand's called Teapot. And we use high select teas with strain-specific cannabis. And it was just picked as Product of the Year last year in Canada for the cannabis beverage business. And the insight inside of cannabis, which is so interesting to me, of how consumers' mindset is of now alcohol is pretty much the new sugar in a lot of people's minds. Alcohol is extremely bad is what people think about alcohol. But cannabis is good. How did this happen? How did my dad, if he was still alive, would yell at me for making a cannabis beverage drink, but it would be okay to make an alcoholic drink. So things have flipped, and it's goodness that people want inside of their cannabis beverage. So we actually have goodness because they think they're already doing something good for themselves by giving up alcohol and replacing it with cannabis. This is a strange world. When that is now the case, that it is okay to have cannabis. And what's beautiful about beverages when it comes to cannabis is we use something, we take it and have the particles inside of it are nano-encapsulated. So as soon as it hits your esophagus, it starts bleeding into your bloodstream, and the onset is somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes, versus an edible, which is about 45 minutes. So what the beauty of that is that consumers understand exactly where they are, and they can have another. And you're not waiting, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if anyone else has done this, but I have maybe taken an edible, didn't feel anything, so you just take another edible, and then all of a sudden, 3 hours later, the world is a whole different place than you recognize it at this point. So I think the word insight is something that is extremely important, and connecting dots of insights that you see out there to be able to come up with your products. If you talk to an innovative consultant, their number one thing they will tell you to put on every slide, put the problem you're trying to solve first. And then from there, how do you create from that? But that problem you solve is basically comes from an insight. And that insight has to come from you seeing things that are out there and then connecting those dots to come up with different ideas. So I wasn't going to spend so much time. I have three other brands. Bevy, which is a long drink, was unfortunately a failure. But it was the best failure that happened in my entire life because it changed how we do business. I came up with a brand called Loma Vista, which is tequila soda, but we now only test in 3 marketplaces. We used to think we knew everything and would launch these things and go across the United States. We lost about $7.5 to $9 million on Bevy. The introduction between what we spent on it, what we destroyed, and all the things we had to do. And it cost us about $1.5 million to $2 million for me to come up with an idea and launch it in 3 markets and give it a year try. So my job is to come up with 3 or 4 ideas every year from this point forward and test them in the marketplace and give them 1 year to make them work out. So Loma Vista is our tequila soda, partner with a guy whose family owns the King Ranch in Texas, which is the largest ranch in Texas. And his other ranch is in far west Texas, and there's a spot where his mom got married. And he lives, and they call it the Loma Vista, the top of this mesa looking out of the Rio Grande. And then I have a new brand called Slingers, which RTDs are a big thing right now, and we're now doing an F&B RTD, and that's an 8%, 24-ounce can for $2.99. That's a whole different story. Probably nobody inside this room, but it will sell in Quincy, I can tell you that. So nextly is why am I kind of thought I was here, but I wanted to actually spend more time in the other one because I thought it was more interesting than this. But I want to go inside of this to tell you there's a new word. And I heard this word, and I was like, oh my God, that's me! I can't believe that's me! I can't believe this word. This is so cool. Intrapreneur. What the hell was an intrapreneur? And then I start to find out that's what I've been doing for 32 years. I've been an intrapreneur at Boston Beer Company. And there's a lot of wonderful things. And all I wanted to do here for you is to open up your minds that there's another opportunity, because everyone talks about being an entrepreneur, but there's also this intrapreneur thing. So what the hell is an intrapreneur? It's basically somebody who's an innovator inside of a company that's established. And there's a lot of wonderful things about that, especially if you're in the position, if you have a company like mine, where we weren't public. When I started, I was the 17th person hired. I got shares of the penny in the beginning, and every time I come up with an idea, I get a percentage of that in stock, and our stock has gone from a penny to $1,300 a share. Fortunately, now it's at $375 a share, but that's another whole story. And if you're in that situation, you can have these great ways of developing brands, creating and flourishing ideas after ideas, because my job is to make these ideas. And it is so exciting to be able to come up with these jobs over and over and over again and come up with things. So I'm now on my next, I have 4 other ideas. I have a tepache. Does anyone know what tepache is in this room? That's one of my damn problems with tepaches. It's been around for 1,000 years. It was made by the Mayans. It's pineapple peels that are then fermented and make this magnificent liquid. And I'm working with Dole to actually Del Monte to work with their leftover pineapple rinds to make this amazing beverage called tepache. I'm going next week to see a guy about taking boba tea and the bubbles inside of that, and actually he has something called cocktailed caviar, which is gin or vodka in these little bubbles. And it's like bubble tea, and you pour it into a drink, and it's filled with alcohol. Now, my brain went, originally when I saw this, I wanted to do an emulsion for cannabis for that and put the emulsion of the cannabis into the bubbles. But damn science, you damn scientists, ruined me, because what happens when you leave it in the liquid, it wants to get out and be like the other liquid inside the container, so you can't just hold it inside of it. And there's 2 types of bubbles in this world. When you make bubble tea, there's a tapioca and there's a round sphere. And the round sphere then just wants to be like everything else. So reverse osmosis comes about, and that ruined my damn idea. But I was like, oh, this is so great. I could put a little bit of a cannabis into those. You bite into those, and you're going to be able to get this inside your beverage. How great is that? Damn science. So anyway, back to this. There's all these things on the left-hand side that's an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of wonderful things about being an entrepreneur. Freedom, a huge opportunity to make a lot of money if you have these things happen. But if you make a lot of money, sometimes you might have to sell, which you did not do, which I'm very, very proud of you, because my boss, he's 73 years old. He's been doing this forever, and he's like, why am I ever going to give up my job? This is what I love more than anything, and it's going to keep me alive for the rest of my life. And that's what entrepreneurs be able to do, to be able to have that freedom, be able to do it. There is high risk. You got to do everything, correct? You do everything from washing the pans to selling it. And then you have to, really, to me, entrepreneurs that are successful have one thing that is following a true passion that they believe in. But I have that same thing. I have passions. I just don't have to take as many risks, and I still get rewarded. So it's kind of a nice thing. That's why I was like, ooh, I'm an entrepreneur. This is awesome. So the things that are in between is the willingness to learn. Learn to fail. Both of us do that. I mean, you have to learn to fail, and if you don't. Motivate your teams, right? Everyone has to do that. Learn from your failures, and also adapt from those failures to change. And most people sometimes are a little bit too stuck. They have an idea, and they don't flex out of that original idea, and you need to flex out of that idea as the marketplace makes you change. Don't be so stuck of what you think is what you start from plan A was. By the time you get to plan Z, the world is going to change 16 times, and you have to be adaptable to this, which goes down to some of the other things inside of this flexibility. And you also have to be a salesperson. And a lot of people who don't realize that being a salesperson, and a lot of you guys doing apps and things along those lines, reality is you're going to have to talk to human beings to make these things happen, that you can't just do it over computers. And I've watched one company that I was involved in. I have some things on the side that I do some side projects. And there was a person from here, brand called Freebird, that we wanted to take your app and not have you use Uber or Lyft anymore, but we would bring you to restaurants at a discount and give you a discount off your Uber. And we had set up technology so that you would go on and you could go to a restaurant and you would get $5 back if you actually went to that restaurant. We had technology bet up that if your credit card was at that restaurant and it would show up, we would give you $5 credit back onto your Uber. And we were delivering physical bodies to restaurants. But what happened was the guys that I got involved with that were all venture guys, and none of them were a sales person. And all they did was do spreadsheets, presentations, raise money, and no one worked the streets to drive a brand. You have to remember to be a salesperson. Again, where I'm at is I have a steady work-life balance. I'm allowed to be able to do that because I have others. I have a much lower risk. I get to use both data and gut. That's the beauty. Most entrepreneurs have to use their gut. They don't get to use data. I have an amazing research team that helps me find and my ideas that I have, that they then validate those through research, and we go through different stages of research to be able to do that. Interdepartment relationships inside of our company, it's kind of a weird thing for us to kind of have to work in all different parts of the company because we're using all stages because we're kind of like a little mini company inside of a company. I get a steady paycheck and benefits. I get stock options if you're in the right place. And also, quite frankly, the most important of all this that's not on there is, are you happy? And I'm extremely happy with where I'm at, what I get to do. And I think that's the bottom line of whatever you do in life, intrapreneur, entrepreneur, whatever it is, if you're not happy, you should go find something that makes you happy because you're never going to be, if you're doing that all the time, it makes no sense. So if I had to leave with anything, is insights are the most important, connecting dots to others, and inviting yourself to meet human beings. Thank you very much.